Good Monday evening, everyone. This is Stephen Thieberg filling in for Bob. This is Branco broadcast for April 24th. Tonight we have Roger Cicchese and Zane Kronheim to talk about, I guess, Sebastian's Tale or whatever else they're going to talk about. So take it away, guys.
Okay.
Well, I was going to talk about Sebastian's nose, but I thought his tail would be more fun. I'm only kidding. Thank you for inviting us. I'll speak for both of us for a minute, but I'll soon turn the festivities over to Miss Jane because, truthfully, she has a much nicer voice than I do. And I think I'm being affected by some kind of seasonal allergy because my voice sounds a little strange to me. Anyway, we're here tonight to present something to you that you might not have thought about. For many years, most of us, well, I'll bet all of us, have been listening to audiobooks or what many people call talking books, either that we bought through commercial outlets like stores or we might have downloaded from Audible, or books that we borrowed in years past on cassette or record, and now more recently digital cartridges from the National Library Services, Library of Congress, some of us through the regional libraries in our state, and some just downloaded them from Bard. And, you know, most of those books are really well done, and most of the narrators or readers are very good. Some aren't, but most are really quite good. But what we're here to talk with you about tonight is kind of a giant step beyond the typically narrated audiobook. Without going into much detail, I'll just simply say that Sebastian's Tale is one of a number of projects completed by Voices of Xperience, a small independent recording studio located in the beautiful woods of Harrisville, New Hampshire, not too far from Keene, New Hampshire. And what we hope to do this evening is two things. To talk with you about the project itself, which is kind of how this all came together and what it's like to do a book like this, and play you some excerpts from the audiobook, which basically show you that it's more than just one or two people reading out loud and doing a nice read on a good book. It does involve some special effects, and it also involves some rather extraordinary voices that you almost will never get in a straight read of an audiobook. So it really makes it, what I guess we've come to decide is that it makes it a performance rather than a simple read. And that's something that we specialize in. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Jane while I get a couple of technical things ready so we can begin to share some of these excerpts with you. Here's Jane Kronheim. Jane?
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak with you tonight on the Branco broadcast. And like Roger said, that Voices of Xperience is a special audio business, and we specialize in, among other things, doing these audio books. But it's not just an audio book. It's a performance, which he mentioned. So when the author named Dylan Weiss reached out to us, she's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, she wrote this wonderful book called Sebastian's Tale, a Skunk Tales Trilogy. So I'll give you a little background about the story before we give you some of the clips from it. This involves a young skunk named Sebastian and his cousin, Willie the Weasel. Already we've got two great characters, Sebastian and Willie. They're sort of the stars of this story, if I must say so myself. And what they're attempting to do is to show concern for what's happening in the woodlands in what's called Penn's Wood. So it brings together the troubles that the woodland animals are having, the troubles that some of the human beings are having, with the idea of oil drilling and fracking that is going on. Some of you have probably heard about fracking. And it tends to devastate the land, and sometimes it can pollute the local waters. So young Sebastian and his sidekick, Willie the Weasel, set out to learn about life. They go one way, they could go to enlightenment, and the other way, what's that other directions called?
Unenlightenment.
Unenlightenment.
Pretendment, right?
What is that?
Didn't you say pretendment?
It's pretend that I almost said, you're going to laugh at me. I almost said predicament.
Not too far off either.
Oh, my God.
See, I'm glad I tuned in when you were on Radio Perkins so I could remember it for you.
I know. Thank you so much for that. You've got me on the spot here.
All right.
Well, we're going to give you some clips from this as to what happens to the young Sebastian. So we're going to begin with this one right here.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, 1 second. Here we go.
Soft-faced Sylvia giving her an encouraging smile.
Sylvia, my Sylvia, as beautiful as our woodlands. Why didn't you tell me that you're descended from the most famous of all skunks in skunkdom, the one who discovered skunk stink?
Saul's smile grew bigger.
That Captain Bloomer is your great-grandfather to the 15th power of greats?
Because I was afraid, Sylvia whispered. Saul scratched his head in puzzlement.
But what were you afraid of?
First, I was afraid that you might select me as your mate only because I come from a famous family. Second, I was afraid that you might not select me because of the stripeless gene I carry that could someday afflict one of our kids. And now it has. Number 1 has no stripes. After much deliberation, Wanda and Webster decided the best solution was for Willie to live with cousins Sylvia and Saul, who maintained a large burrow in one of the forests of Pennswood.
Can you hear that okay?
Yes.
It's not too loud?
No.
No, keep it coming. Sounds great.
Okay. I'm going to give the mic back to Jane, and we'll get ready for another follow-up clip.
Okay, so already you get the idea that something's going on here that has to do with the skunks. Maybe it has to do with a skunk that doesn't have the stripes, or the invention of the skunk stink itself, which is their weapon of defense. Let's hear another clip. One day, during a discussion about their differences, Sebastian learned about his stripelessness.
You know, Sebastian, back in the Deep Creek, when I went to Enlightenment School, I got to see skunk kids, and you were different from them.
Different? What do you mean, look different? How?
You're missing something.
Sebastian shook his head in confusion.
What am I missing?
Well, all the skunk kids I met had white stripes, just like your mom and dad, and you don't.
Willie pointed out.
You mean I'm not just like Mom and Dad?
No, well, like I said, you're different. We're both different, not just different from each other, but different from other skunks and weasels. I'm supposed to be long and thin, but instead I'm short and fat. And you, well, you're stripeless.
So there you have a couple of examples from the book, but there are more. Would you like to hear more? Are you still there?
Yeah, well,
Oh.
Yeah.
Would you like to hear more?
I think you have a captive audience.
Okay. Then here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring you something a little unusual among the tracks. 1 second. Yeah, here we go. Here we go.
Placing her forepaws on top of the Altentot, Sylvia took several deep breaths before clearing her throat and reciting the mystical poem over the ancient text. May the wisdom of the elders be with me now. As I read these ancient stories, I make this vow to translate the historic words on these pages exactly as it was written by the sages. I will begin these fairy tales in a grim way, starting with once upon a time is what I'll say, and happily ever after will end all tears, replaced with joy and happiness, laughter and cheers. They were scurrying across the lawn in the direction of the woods when Sebastian abruptly disappeared. Willie slowed and began sniffing the ground.
Sebastian, where are you?
Down here.
Willie heard Sebastian's voice coming from beneath the ground a few feet in front of him. He began sniffing around the hole from which Sebastian's voice seemed to be coming.
Hey, Willie, wiggle yourself in. There's more room down here than you can possibly imagine, even more than we had back home.
Willie tried to suck in his stomach to make himself smaller, but no matter how much he wiggled, wriggled, and squirmed, he couldn't squeeze through the hole.
I can't get in, Sebastian. The hole isn't big enough.
Well, then, start digging and make it bigger.
Well, guys, I will tell you first of all, if you were listening,
you probably noticed in the last two tracks something odd happened with the sound. There wasn't anything wrong with your telephones, and there wasn't anything wrong with you. Well, I'm not sure about that, but
it might be the Twilight Zone.
It could be the Twilight Zone. However, it might be the Outer Limits. The truth is, in the two previous tracks, when you heard that sort of mystical-sounding woman's voice with kind of an odd, kind of a ethereal quality to it, that was one of the sections in the book where I introduce what I call environmental effects as opposed to regular sound effects. You know, like the wind blowing or trees falling down or me chewing on celery or whatever.
Good evening, Roger. Bob Branco. I am now in the call.
Oh, good.
How are you, Roger?
Hi, Bob. Hey.
Welcome, Bob. Welcome to your show.
It's really funny to welcome the host to his own show. It's great to have you here.
Well, I'm very pleased, Roger. I just had an issue with my email Verizon that I had to take care of. It took a lot longer. Thank you for your patience, and thank you, Steve Theberge, for filling in for me this evening. And now I'll let you talk, Roger. Sorry for the interruption.
Not a problem. Happy to have you aboard. Now I feel complete. It's kind of like putting on my shoes, you know. Now I got both of them on. Oh, I'm wearing slippers. Anyway, the second track that you heard just a minute ago, where you hear Sebastian and Willie talking, Sebastian has fallen through a hole in somebody's lawn and has landed in a burrow underground. And that's why the voice has that sort of hollowy, kind of slightly echoey, but mostly hollow sound. That, again, was another kind of environmental effect to give you the feeling that you really were in a burrow underground as opposed to just sitting out at a table reading from a book. And there are periodic occasions during the course of this 6-hour performance when there are different kinds of environments that occur or that the critters or characters find themselves in, and sometimes we did things to make it obvious that the environment was quite different or unique. I guess at this point, before we go further, because in a minute I'm going to hand the mic back to Jane, do any of you have any questions so far? I'll bet some of you do. So unmute your phone if you have a question and feel free to ask at this point.
I guess
Hello, Alice. Can you hear me?
Yes.
What is the recording time for that particular audiobook?
6 hours and 2 minutes. And it is available on one audio CD. We figured out a way, the wizard geniuses at Voices of Xperience, no, I'm not looking in the mirror. The wizard geniuses at Voices of Xperience decided that if we put this on regular compact discs the way most books come through, it would be on 5 CDs, and it would be too expensive. And we felt like a lot of people might not want to pay $30 when the print copy only costs $15. So we figured out a way to package the entire book on one CD. We didn't cut anything out of the book. We didn't shorten anything. What we did was switch it from stereo to mono, which in truth doesn't make any difference, and we switched from the WAV, which is the commercial audio format, to a special sampling rate, I know it's getting a bit technical, to MP3. At the end of the day, what you get is one CD with all 24 chapters and all 6 hours of the recording that'll play on most modern CD players. You can play it on your computer. According to Jeff Friedlander, you can play it on the Plex Talk Pocket. I have a Plex Talk PTR2 that it will play on.
Yeah.
It'll play on most car CD players, and if you have a computer and don't want to listen to it on your computer, you can easily transfer it to a MP3 player or a tablet. I transferred it to my iPad, and it plays there fine, too. So in most cases, what we did was figure out a way for the print version and the audio version to sell for about the same price. So that's good for everybody. Good question. And who asked that? Was that Alice?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Where are you calling from, Alice?
I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you call, and it's nice to hear your voice. I thank you especially for calling. Any other questions before we go back?
I got a quick one. You said it's a trilogy, so has this author done the second and third installments yet?
I'm going to let Jane field those questions because they're important ones, and her answers are not they're not quite as simple as you might think. So I'm going to pass it over to the wise one. Here's Jane.
Okay. The wise one is here. Good question, because it's called the Skunk Tales Trilogy. So Sebastian's Tale is the very first book, and our first audio with it. The next one is actually called Norton's Tale. It's already up on Amazon. It is in print. So it's not ready for audio yet, but we want to be working on it, so you never know. Norton's Tale is a little different than the first one. It takes you a bit into the past, into the history of this story behind the skunks and the weasels. That's all I'm going to say with that one.
Sounds
and
like a
the third one will be coming up. The author has informed us is that she's just now started writing it, so we can't spill the beans on that.
Oh, no.
We want to get some more clips going for you guys, and I think what we should do, just to make sure you're listening, is to bring up one about these two characters that Willie and Sebastian met when they were wandering around and got lost in Pennswood. And this involves two kind of scary characters. Roger, can you bring up 7?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to bring up thread 7 here. So hang in there, everybody. Don't get too nervous when you hear these characters. All righty. I think they're coming up.
Here we go, guys.
Ready?
Now, that's a deep subject. Go ahead, Frank. Tell them all about it. Really, Frank. I don't want to discuss the particulars. You know that it wouldn't be good if anything were to leak out. Ha, ha, ha. Oh, that's rich. Leak out, you say. You're real blessed, Frank.
I admit that one's a little strange.
They even freak me out when I listen to them, but Roger and I produce these voices that then Wizard Roger over here put through an interesting test of environmental sound. Go ahead, explain that, Roger.
The voices of Frick and Frack, and you did hear the names right, not Click and Clack, not to be confused with the Tappet brothers. May one of them, may his soul rest in peace. The creation of their voices actually took 2 forms, aside from the obvious voice change. I put the voices through an effects processor, which does, I think the one we have here does about 100 different functions. And I also changed the pitch of the voices. So between the sort of rough-sounding effects like that, and changing the pitch and the speed of the speech, it comes up with voices that sound really scary and weird, but almost human, but not quite. And I hate to admit this, but one of you technical people out there may wonder. The full segment of the Frick and Frack takes about 11 minutes to actually listen to the whole segment that they do. It took me 8 hours to record, edit, and produce that section with all the environmental alterations and pitch changes. It literally had to be pieced together.
And that was scary.
It was scary. It scared myself, to tell you the truth. So again, good questions.
Yep, next.
All right, let's see what I'm going to give Jane back the mic, and we'll cue up the next track.
Okay, I want to talk to you guys out there who are listening a little bit about what's going to be happening on this next track, because Sebastian and Willie meet up with this amazing groundhog, and his name is Beauregard Lee, and he is a really massive groundhog who helps them understand what they're supposed to do in the underground area of Berkeley, and trying to pull together all of these animals of the forest to battle against all that oil drilling and all that fracking that's going on. So we're going to listen up here to Mr. Beauregard Lee, who's actually General Beauregard Lee. You ready? Okay, Roger, have you got it? I think you're at track 8, which is after frickin' frack. All right, everybody, be patient. It's coming. I really promise you. Okay.
Y'all, allow me to introduce myself. I am General Beauregard Lee, but you can call me Beauregard.
That's an example of, actually, I should probably take a step back. I just thought of something that might be interesting for listeners. You may wonder, how do you come up with voices for characters in a book like this? First of all, there are 28 distinct voices in this particular book. And all of the voices, except for 2, were created and performed by Jane and me. 2 of them were performed by other individuals. One is one that you haven't heard and won't hear unless you get the book. And, of course, I know you're all going to order copies, except for Jeff, who already has one. And the other voice is a voice that we needed something very special. We needed a news reporter, but we needed her to sound like she was actually reporting on location. And we had to bring somebody else in who has experience doing that sort of thing to do that voice to make it sound authentic. However, the reason I brought this up is choosing voices for characters in a book, particularly when it's a performance, not just a straight read, is not an easy process. Some of it depends on the performers, obviously, but a lot of it depends on the author or the writer of the book, because he or she has to have some ideas in their head about what they think a character might sound like. Now, honestly, that's not an easy thing to do, because to tell you the truth, Dylan Weiss told us that for the most part, when she wrote her book, she was not imagining actual voices for most of the characters until we started working on it. So here's what we did. And we do this for other similar projects. We have prepared a compact disc that has samples of some of the voices that we can perform. It doesn't have them all, because it would go on forever. But the disc that we prepare and send out to prospective clients contains audio samples of over 72 different character voices. Now, Dylan Weiss went through those voices and picked quite a few that she liked, and then with a little guidance from us and back and forth with us, narrowed it down to what sounded the best for the most important characters in the book. Because not every character needs to have a really distinct voice, but the important ones do. However, sometimes that doesn't fully solve the problem. Because sometimes an author has an idea in his or her mind that doesn't quite match up with any of the voices on the CD. Or maybe it sort of does, but not completely.
So I think they need to listen to something unusual that was done with a different voice, which is track 9, right after Beauregard Lee. So listen up to this, everybody.
Just give me a second.
This is a very important point in the book, where a broadcast was coming up on a television set at a local diner called Dell's Diner. I can't give up much more than that. But Roger's going to find this, because we want you to hear what we did.
Keep talking.
And this is track 9, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, like Roger said, producing an audio book of this nature, which we keep calling a performance because that's what it is, really requires a lot of patience a lot of imagination, and contact with the author, who gives us his or her input into the type and style of voices that are needed for these characters. So how do you
sometimes if they're not actually on the sampler CD that we send out, we actually will create new voices based on what the author asks us about.
Are you there?
And here we go, if you'll see what I mean.
Abby was suddenly distracted when she heard the phrase, "Explosion reported," coming from the countertop TV that the babysitter habitually kept on all day. "The news just came on and I want to listen," she said as she turned up the volume.
At 6:15 this morning, one of 3 tanks caught fire. It has been reported that the compressor station at the well site exploded. Initial findings suggest that the explosion occurred due to a malfunctioning heater, causing the hatch of a second tank to blow off, catching fire. 3 workers were injured and are currently being treated for second-degree burns. It's unclear at this time if residents living within the area need to be evacuated. As more information is available, we will keep you posted. This is Amy Gold reporting on location.
So you see how a sound can be really totally different? There we were trying to create the sound of a cheap television set with a lousy sounding speaker, and at the same time what it might sound like if Amy Gold actually was reporting on location. I'll tell you a secret, she was. And that's why it sounds so authentic. But we have to get an Amy Gold character with that kind of experience to make it sound authentic. Again, I'll ask, are there any questions?
I had a comment because I got your sample CD. I was never thinking of, like, when I was writing what they sounded like, and I went through all these 72 voices, and they were great, but it's like I have to really do a lot of thinking of what are my characters supposed to sound like.
Well, that's where we can help you. That's where a back and forth, and I agree, good thinking is worth $1 million because you can save yourself a lot of time and frustration by thinking about it. But the truth is, when you're writing a book in print or for the electronic format, most people aren't thinking about the voices of what they'll actually sound like. So it's completely understandable. That's why we consider an audio sample CD as a starting point, not an ending point. And as I mentioned, sometimes, honestly, there are a couple of characters in the book that you're referring to that do match up. One in particular, you have a character named Ken, and I won't say any more about it, but his voice is actually on that CD. And sometime when we're off the line, I can give you some history on that. But most of the voices probably wouldn't apply to the characters in your book. A couple might, but some real thought could go on and some real back and forth dialogue. And that's where the creative side comes in, where we can probably help develop and create some important voices for characters. I'll just mention that in Stephen's book, which is, by the way, a book that we've read and loved, and all of you should get it. If you don't have it, you're missing out on something really interesting. And frankly, it was a bit surprising. His characters, most of them are young people, teenagers and young adults, which means most of their voices will probably have a younger sound to them, with a few exceptions. Although I have to admit, if we get to work on your book, I'm looking forward to doing the let's say the off-world characters without giving anything away, because I've got my own ideas about what they'll sound like. But let's get back to the idea of voices. We create them, or we modify an existing voice, or we use electronics to alter an existing voice to make it sound like something somewhat familiar but not really familiar. And when you can't see the character, but you're only listening, we kind of take advantage of using your imagination to help you imagine the character even more so, instead of creating something that only looks a certain way.
Okay, so yeah. I'm going to take over here for a minute because we want to take you into a slightly different environment now. What we're looking at is the ground forces. We'll follow your example, Roger. That's track 12. And this is the point at which Sebastian has created an army, and they are out in the environment. Am I not correct there, Roger? I believe they're in the environment. So you're going to hear something else that we did, which completely can alter the way, you feel about what you're listening to. So are we ready to go on that? We're almost there.
Yes.
We're just about there? All right. Ready to listen.
Here we go.
Abigail waited for a response from Sebastian and was relieved when she heard muffled orders being given.
Attention! Attention! First troop, the enemy is approaching. Line up, tail to tail. Ready, march! 1, 2, 3, 4.
You hear the echo there? And you hear his sort of younger-sounding voice? That's another example of something we can do with voices. We can take a recognizable voice, like Sebastian, and we can make him echo, like that with technology. So again, it alters his voice and gives you a sense of an environment that's different from someone just sitting in front of a microphone reading.
Okay. Do we have the track where we're in the snow out there, and we have the guys in the big pickup truck?
Oh, let me see.
Let's see. Is that after the answer is blown in?
No, I think it's the next to the last track.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 was track 15.
No, we don't have that.
How about ground forces will follow your example? No?
Nope.
Okay, we don't have that one. Too bad.
So, well, you know what the author said to us last night when we were telling her about preparing to do this, and she was very excited about it. She said, do me a favor. Don't play them the whole story or unravel it all, because then they won't want the book.
Yeah, we want you guys.
And you know what? It's most fun.
We'll get the book, believe me.
What?
Oh, I said I will get the book.
You won't be sorry. And just before we hang up tonight, I'll tell you exactly how to get it. Jeff Friedlander will tell you, and I'm only saying this because this is what he told me, there were certain parts in the book that caused him to almost not be able to stop laughing. Jeff has a good sense of humor, and I've known him for many, many years, and he can be a very serious fellow, but he also has a good sense of humor. The other thing is, another person who purchased the book, the audio book from us, who's not on the line tonight, told me that when he got it, he thought, I'll just take a listen to it, see what I think, listen to it a little here, maybe a little today, a little tomorrow, a little the next day, which is typically how most people would listen to it. Well, he put it in his CD player and started listening to it about noontime one afternoon, and he sat there for just over 6 hours till the book was done. He said he couldn't stop listening. I'm not making that up.
Book.
It is really a fun book.
And well, I enjoyed the tracks I heard before just as much as I did the first time when you were on the Radio Perkins. So
and we played a few of those same ones and a few different ones tonight. Let me just see something. Okay, we got about 7:15, so we have a few more minutes to chat.
Any more questions?
Additional questions?
Comments? Please.
Now, yes, I do have a question. Now, are you doing most of the voices on there, or do you get a whole group of people doing different voices?
What would your guess be?
Let me talk to
My guess is that you're doing some of the voices, and that you get a few other people doing other voices.
Well, we're going to have you guess again.
My guess is you're doing all the voices.
We did.
All of them?
Okay. We did all of these voices with the exception of 2 individuals who stepped in. So out of the 28, we did 26 of these voices, both of us, Roger and I. So some of the voices, like the frickin' track character with those scary sounding voices, those are all electronically. Yeah, we took care of all 28 voices with the exception of 2.
Okay.
Because this is a kind of audio studio with the creativity and the enthusiasm and interest that we have, so that when people contact us, they know what they're going to get into because we have this capability. Roger?
For about 30 years, some of you don't know this, and perhaps the only person on this line that has known me long enough maybe to know this, I used to run another recording studio years ago. It had a different name. It was in a different place. And back in those days, I set up the studio to do audio productions like this, science fiction and children's stories. But to tell you the truth, I never got to do any. I did lots of other stuff. But one of the things I was looking for over all those years was the premier sound effects library. It was made by a company that's no longer in business, and the trouble is it was available, but it was several $1,000s to obtain this premier sound effects library that was recorded on 50, I did say 50 compact discs. Well, in the past 6 months, I have managed to acquire a copy for our studio. So if we ever get a production where there's enough financial support behind it to include real sound effects and not just environmental effects, we can do a real bang-up job, because this library is a digital sound effects library, and it's one of the very best ever produced. So I mention that only because we're hoping sooner or later we'll get contracted to do something like the production that National Public Radio did for the Star Wars series. I'm sure some of you remember those. And we'd love to do a production like that, and now we've got the ability to do sound effects from a library, and we also have recording equipment such that we could go out and gather sound in real environments and incorporate that as well. Additional questions? Yes.
So is that the one you were saying has nature noises and crickets and real thunder and all that?
Any nature sound you can imagine, maybe even a few you can't.
Thought you come from the bird family?
Jane can actually demonstrate a couple of things that we use as sound effects.
Are you ready?
Here, take a listen to this.
Yep. What do you think of that? That was me.
That was Jane imitating an owl, which is pretty good. But we actually have a recording of 2 owls talking to each other.
Out in my woods.
That I made several years ago, and it's in most unbelievably beautiful stereo with almost no background noise. So I'm constantly capturing sound effects as well as looking for great recordings that other people have done. Additional questions? Let me tell you while you're thinking how to get the audio book. You can call us at Voices of Xperience and give us a credit card number, or you can make a payment using PayPal. If you have that service or you subscribe to that, you can make a payment from your credit card or your bank account by following the directions carefully and make a payment of $18, and that would also be true if you use a credit card. That $18 not only includes the price of the book on one audio CD, but it also includes the price of shipping it to you. It costs about $3 to package it and do the right postage wherever you are in the U.S., and we send it out first-class mail. So that's how you get it. Voices of Xperience can be reached in a couple of ways. You can call us at area code 603-827-3859. I'll repeat that again. 603, that's the area code, 827-3859. And if you want to send a check for payment, people still do that, and you'll be welcome to do that as well. Personal checks, bank teller's checks, or money order to Post Office Box 446. I'm getting there. Okay. P.O. Box 446, Harrisville, 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 New Hampshire, 03450. If you do make out a check or money order or a teller's check, it should be made out to Voices of Xperience. And the word experience in this case, it's not that we're poor spellers, begins with an X, not the usual E. So it's Xperience.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, your website that is the same way too then, right? Xperience with the X.
I'm sorry?
Is your website that way too, Xperience?
Actually, you can go to our website, which is voicesofexperience.com. Or, if you want to communicate with us, I'll give you the secret code. You can send email to the number 1, that's 1nation_sound at gmail.com. So that's the number 1, not the word 1. 1nation_sound at gmail.com. And somebody asked about why does Voices of Experience begin with an X and not an E? Good question. It's because it's an acronym. If you take the V from voices, the O from of, and the X that begins experience, it spells the word vox, which of course means voice.
That's clever.
So we decided to be a little bit cutesy and do something different, not to mention the fact that at the time there was nobody on the Internet called Voices of Experience, so we were able to leap over that hurdle as well. And since all that we do, and Bob Branco will tell you that, and Jeff will tell you that, and others who are on the line or maybe just listening will tell you that most of what we do does not involve music. We do some music things, but most of it is audio in one way or another, including restoration of old or rare recordings or materials that were recorded in some format that nobody uses anymore, like cassettes, out-of-print LPs, old reel-to-reel tapes. We do a lot of that stuff that were recorded in various speeds and formats. In fact, I will just tell you the truth that the most rare, the most unusual thing that we've done as far as format transfers is that about 3 years ago, part of one project that we did involved transferring something from recordings made on a spool of copper wire to a digital format. And that was for the American Foundation for the Blind and a big project related to Helen Keller and voices related to Helen Keller.
Do you do VHS conversions?
Pardon me?
Do you do VHS conversions?
For audio, yes. We do. We do, and we also will do DVD conversions for audio, and we're working on being able to do beta conversions for audio. I'm awaiting a machine that hasn't arrived yet. We can also do digital audio tape. Many musicians out there who know what DAT is, dis and DAT. There's a format called DAT, standing for digital audio tape, and we can also transfer those to CDs. We do nearly every format, including the Library of Congress 4-track format. If somebody has something that's recorded in that format and they want it digitized and put on CDs, we can do that too. We have special machines that can play those speeds, and they're not Library of Congress tape players, although we have 2 of those and we rebuild them. If anyone has one that needs a new battery pack and is willing to pay to have it done, we actually can resurrect those machines. So, with all that blabbering on my part, I'm giving you a little more time to think of questions, and I think our time is just about up. 7:55, according to my old sharp talking clock. So, any questions or comments?
Yes, I just wanted to make one comment. Even from the beginning, when they mentioned about the stripes in the woods, you get a feeling that there's something wrong, not quite right with the environment.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Right from the beginning, you know there's something up and something's a little askew. And as you go through the book, of course, you will discover there's more wrong than just the environment. There's a lot more wrong, and some of it, these characters are working to make it right, and how they do it is part of what makes the book so irresistible. Any other comments or questions? Does anyone need any of that information repeated that I blabbed out kind of fast? So you're all going to order copies of the audiobook, which is great. We'll look forward to that. And you know what? The more encouragement you're able to provide, not only by getting the book, but by telling your friends and fans and network people about it, and build up a little momentum about getting the author to record the next book, the more likely it is to get done, because she does want to do it. She did put all of the funds up herself to produce this first book. And to do this kind of a production, I have to tell you, is a lot more expensive than a straight read. And she very much wants to do the next book. So the more excitement there is generated about the next book, and I will tell you that I've started to read the next book. We really want to do this one in audio. So I'm hoping in the next 6 months or so, maybe we'll get a chance and the resources will be provided so that we can do it, because I know you'll all love it, especially if you read Sebastian's Tale. But even if you haven't, I'm quite sure you'll also love the next book and probably the one after that. So, Bob, I'm going to turn it back to you if you're still there.
I am. Roger, it's always great hearing you, and you have a very eloquent speaking voice. Jane as well. Continued success with Voices of Experience in general, and hopefully you'll get a lot of sales from the book as well. I want to thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Bob. And if we can be of service to any of you or your friends with regard to converting old cassettes, we've just done a whole bunch for somebody whose name I won't mention, but we have done some, and they came out really good, even though they were 30 years old or more. It's what we specialize in. Even when the cassettes don't play in normal cassette players, we can often resurrect them and make them work. A sledgehammer does wonders. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, folks, I thank you so much for inviting us. It's always fun to come on the Branco broadcast because you never know what's going to happen. And any of you, feel free to call us if you have other questions or you're curious about what we're up to. And I guess that's it.
It's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Thank you.
All right, there's a tape.
I want to thank you again, and especially thank you, Stephen and Bob, for making it so much fun for us.